3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host and relationship coach. Really a warm welcome from all of us here on British Muslim TV to all of you, whether you are streaming live on Sky Channel 752, Facebook or Twitter. We really appreciate your continuous engagement and you always tuning in and streaming and sending in all your messages and comments, and we love that. And tonight is no different. Please make sure that if you want to call in, you are more than welcome to do so by dialing in directly to the studio on 01924 231083. Please do ask the bill payer's permission as standard network rates do apply. You can also use our free WhatsApp service to message me even anonymously to ask any of your queries or questions to myself or my guest tonight. And that number is 07585835150. We have another topic for you tonight with a lovely guest, and it's another interesting one, which, around relationships again, but there's so much issues and challenges that we are facing that we are going to use more psychological techniques and strategies in order to actually gain better relationships with our spouses. Whether you're looking for marriage or already in a marriage, this is definitely for you. So inshallah, let me introduce my guest tonight, who's going to actually talk about overcoming barriers to healing relationships. And we have with us tonight, Samina Rai. Assalamu alaikum, Samina.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate this. I've been looking forward to this conversation for such a long time, and we finally got you. I know how busy you are. And you know what? This is a really interesting topic because I know how you have worked really hard to actually come up with this topic as well, and to actually, be passionate about speaking about it. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about yourself, and especially what's an attachment healer?
So with my work as an attachment healer, I basically support people who've got difficulties in getting into relationships, and it's usually because of their attachments from their early life. So I come in to deliver some therapy that will help bridge the gap between where they are struggling to where they really want to be. So basically that's in a quick summary, a nutshell.
I love that. It's really important because a lot of us don't realize, our body, our mind, how we are brought up, how all of that really affects us in the future. And we are only learning to, starting to learn about this and opening up about this. So when it comes to basically, finding out, who we are and, what is the sort of like the barriers that we have, what do you even describe as a barrier in a relationship? That's something that we don't even need, we don't even have an idea as to how we can define that. How would you define that? Because we don't want to show it like as if to say, oh, this is my boundary, this is your boundary. So what are these barriers that you're talking about?
Sure. So to be honest, I'm going to start with something really generic that I've noticed is a trend that's happening out there. The divorce rate is really going up and up. And that's causing this feeling that, marriage is not something that's great anymore. It's becoming an old-fashioned concept, even affecting the Muslim community, sadly. So just looking at statistics, the divorce rate now is 42% in the UK. Now, that's an incredibly high amount. And to top that off, we've also got this push for an independent lifestyle where single life is really being glorified as the way that people like to live, do what you want, you're not answerable. Now, these two things alone are contributing to people not being as appealed towards the marriage idea as they might have been in our parents' generation. So these are like the trends that are happening. You've got marriage is not, as appealing as it used to be, and single life is really appealing. So you've got this constant tug of war between these two ideas that are going on at the moment. And I hear conversations around these topics in circles that I'm in women's circles a lot. And people say, you know, there's so many relatives that have been through divorce and they don't want to be one of those statistics.
Yeah, no, of course. I think what you said is so important about the increase of divorce. And I'm hearing even more and more people coming on TikTok, even women, you know, talking about the statistics. I just saw that today, actually, about saying, you know, more and more people are getting married later, or they're deciding to be single. And even women are, you know, statistically being shown to be happier to be single and with children. And as we know from our faith, that's not something that we want to promote. This is not something that is even healthy for society, even in any kind of culture or background or faith or no faith. I mean, we are here to be human in order to connect with each other, to build and to procreate as well. And even in psychology, it shows about the happiness, you know, to be with a partner that's healthy and obviously to grow with that. So why do you think that's happening? What is the actual link or the sort of bridge that is actually creating this kind of feeling where, you know, we are having more and more failed relationships and people are opting to rather be single than even be in a relationship?
Yeah. So there's a lot of what I consider subliminal programming going on, and we're not often aware of it. So we see images in the media all the time that really glorify the single status, the independent life, that travel the world, do this, do that. And so when you've got that narrative going on and you're being exposed to this through media, through music, through programs, films, all these kind of things, they make it more attractive to actually stay on your own. But I would like to also point out another study that's been done around loneliness. Loneliness is an epidemic levels right now, and it's considered to have a really negative impact on health. So, for example, it's equated to the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, just the effects of being on your own. So these are things that are not talked about, but there are negatives as well around being on your own. The other issue that I commonly come across is women often tell me, because I work with women, that they keep attracting the wrong partner and then they get put off, but they haven't really understood why they attract the wrong partner. So then they just stop looking. They back off. They think, there's nobody suitable out there. And they have these global beliefs about men and marriage that start building up that are quite negative. And then they feed into that narrative that, marriage is maybe not for me.
Well, going back to what you said earlier about loneliness, the other thing is there is a difference between independent and being alone. And nowadays, a lot of people are finding that, yes, there may be this epidemic of loneliness, but that actually happens a lot more statistically with the elderly. But the young, they do socialize a lot more, and they're actually having probably relationships outside the norm, unfortunately. And that's why they are actually happy to not be committed in a relationship. And they're actually having these kind of other relationships, which is not permissible. And so, and being independent, especially as women, is being normalized in a sense that, not to say that it shouldn't be done, but in a sense that we don't need another person and we shouldn't have another person and we shouldn't rely on another person. So I think the narrative here is about, one or the other, when a person can still be independent, they can still be, quite successful, especially as a woman, and still have a partner to support that and be a team player. So I guess what we need to change is the talk around being with somebody is not going to hold you back, because even a lot of women are scared. I speak to a lot of young girls who are like, I've got my education, I've got my freedom to, work and study and, go out, but, getting married, and even men, they're like, if I get married, it's actually like a trap. marriage is looked upon as a trap nowadays. Do you think that we are changing in the way in which we even view a married life compared to before? And I think we need to actually keep up to that and make it okay. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely agree there. Marriage is becoming one of those institutions that people are not drawn to like they used to. And unfortunately, a lot of people have seen negative marriages within their own households growing up. So then they've already got something to compare to. If they've seen an unhealthy relationship between mum and dad, they don't want that to happen to them. So they therefore are already building up walls when it comes to connecting with others and taking that step forward towards a relationship. The other thing that I wanted to say, so when it comes to even attracting the wrong partner, there's a few factors involved there, because a lot of people, they shift the blame onto the other party and they say, you know, I always meet X kind of guy or Y kind of girl, etc. And what they don't realize is that they are actually picking up cues about somebody that are so subconscious. They're picking the same partner over and over because there's some deep-rooted trauma there or beliefs there that are, you know, drawing them to that kind of person.
No, that is a very, very good point, actually. I want to pick up on that a little bit more, but we are coming on to a break very shortly. But I just want to repeat what you said about, you know, choosing the same people, even with a different face, because we are kind of tuned in as to what is from the experience that we know and what we're familiar with. And even if we think that, you know, a relationship is broken down and we're choosing another partner, but we end up with the same character, and we need to obviously work on that. And we need to dig deeper as to why is that happening? And is it the other person that's the issue, or is it you? So that is something that I really want to go into. And I think it's really important because I hear that complaint all the time. You know, I'm choosing the same people. And when I hear to, you know, even some, you know, people that I know personally, and it's like, oh, this is a different guy, but the same scenario happens again. Who's got the same traits. It's just, you know, basically, put up and done up in a different color and polished differently, but deep down to the core, they are the same person that they've actually broken up with, and they found toxic or they found not compatible. So I think that's a really, really good point. And inshallah, we will make sure that we will answer that question, because I think it's really important that we do go into that. Why do we choose the same people over and over again with a different face, with the same character? Seeing you after the break. Take care. Salam.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We're having a great conversation with my lovely guest, Samina, and we are talking about overcoming barriers to having healthy relationships. And I think it's really important that we do discuss this. Before the break, we touched on something really important and interesting, and I'm quite curious as to what the answers are, because I do find a lot of people that, you know, when they've actually finished from one relationship or they're trying to get to know people, they seem to have the same characters pop up all the time, especially when those characters are not compatible, they're toxic, or it's just not for them. But they seem to have the same people come in their lives again and again, and it just shows up all the time. So I want to know, what is that all about? Samina, can you give us some insight as to why that keeps happening? Well, I think that, you know, we're going to get her back in a minute. But before we do, I just want to say, honestly, it's been an amazing show so far. And I think what we need to highlight tonight, it's so important that we understand that relationships do come with a lot of challenges and a lot of issues. And there's so much happening in society today, especially living in the West, where it's kind of infiltrating as to how we live in our lifestyle and our cultures and background. And I've always said that we should separate culture from religion. However, there's nothing wrong in culture if it is in line with our faith. But now we are talking about values, and certain values that are in the actual sort of Western society is now infiltrated in the Muslim community with regards to staying single, getting married a lot longer in age, in life for men and women. And as much as we want to have our education and our profession, and we have heard so many stories of heartbreak and divorce that actually leaves one person, especially the women, where they are left on their own. And if they rely so much on that partnership that they could be actually deserted and they don't have anything to pick themselves up. So there is definitely a reason for you to continue with your studies, with your work, with your profession. But at the same time, we need to understand that that does not give you that lifetime of commitment, of fulfillment, and also fulfilling your being. So Samina, as we were talking before the break with regards to keep having the same characters pop up in our lives, right, with different faces. Why does that happen? So inshallah, if we can get her audio back in. So inshallah, we will get Samina's back with regards to hearing her, but I really am interested to know why that is happening. And I think that it comes back to the fact that when we are childhood in our sort of experience, we do go through a mirroring of how our caregivers, especially our parents, actually brought us up. And what we see, we kind of imitate. And if we are even in a healthy setting, we do want to actually imitate what we have experience of. But especially if it's not in a healthy way, and we have a parent that either dismissed us, did not give us the attention, if you were either the middle child, or if you were someone who was pressured, or you were dismissed, you were not acknowledged, then you will look for that in your relationship, in your partnership. It's not necessarily what you like, but it's what you are familiar with. And you keep bringing those same characters and those same repetition of experiences that you had in your childhood. That's what shows up and comes up in your future relationships. And as much as we think, okay, that person looks differently, but actually what you are attracted to is their demeanor, is their character, is their energy. And that's what we need to sometimes overlook. Now, we think that changing a person, if the relationship has failed, is going to actually get us another relationship. But a lot of the times, it's more about changing ourselves. And even in the Quran, it says, no condition will change on the inside, on the outside, unless you change the condition within. So it's definitely there, even in the scriptures, to tell you and show you that you need to actually have, sort of self-development, because we need to unpeel the layers and the filters that we have created over time, over the years, that may not serve us. And we don't even realize that we are actually not fulfilling and living to our full potential. Now, in order to live to your full potential is to work on yourself, to understand how you were brought up, to understand the pieces that were missing, and to put the puzzle together that fits. And when you have that self-awareness, and when you have that ability of knowing yourself, believing in yourself, and knowing your values and your core beliefs, not necessarily religious beliefs, but your core beliefs, then only we can go forward in life to find that partner to match you. That is something that we need to really address. Self-work. Now, Samina, are you with me?
I am.
Perfect. I missed you in those few minutes, but you know what? You can now enlighten me to that question as to why is it that we keep repeating cycles and coming up with the same characters again and again, especially if they are toxic, they're not compatible. Why do we have the same people coming in our lives in and out all of the time?
Okay, so there's a few reasons. So the first one I'm going to touch upon, if we've observed a relationship that was unhealthy between our parents as young children, that's the model of relationship that you've ended up learning about, and that sits in your subconscious mind. And we can be quite unaware of it. So we might think, I don't want to create a relationship like that, but you end up doing it anyway because the mind, like you said, seeks what's familiar. We have a part of our brain that actually scans the environment and looks for familiar patterns, familiarity. And one of the best examples that I can give that might be more relatable for our viewers is, when you buy a car, a brand new car, and then you start seeing that model of car everywhere you look and you didn't notice it before, it's because it's become part of your focus. So there's a part of the brain that will actually tune in and see that car everywhere. And it's the same with our subconscious. Our model of our relationships comes from our parents, our early attachments. So it's really important that if we want to change our patterns, what we are ending up with when it comes to our relationships gives us an indication there's work to be done on the inside, some inner work to change that pattern. So one of them is observing difficult relationships with our parents. Another one is having poor attachment and attunement from our own parents when we were children. So, for example, if our parents were emotionally unavailable, they weren't able to meet our needs, that's where that misattunement comes in. They wouldn't be able to be there emotionally to see us, to hear us, to meet our needs. Then that gets replicated in adult life too. Another one is if somebody's been through abuse or neglect, they're more likely to get that sort of treatment in adult life. So you might think, well, why would anyone let that happen to them? But the brain, like we say, has this bias towards what's familiar. And until we break that pattern and heal what's caused that trauma in the first place, we end up having the same thing happen again and again and again. And we often blame the other person and say, that man was abusive, or, that woman was abusive, when really we are part of the dynamic. We are co-creators of our relationships. It's not one-sided or the other. We are coming into a dynamic together, and we're both playing a part that's familiar to us, either from our own experience or what we've observed.
I really appreciate you explaining that to me. That is really important information. And I guess what the takeaway for me is that, it's so important how you brought up in the early years, because it really does relate in your future, and especially with your relationships. Now, obviously, part of that is to blame, with the parenting style and the skill, the environment, things like that. And you mentioned that, obviously that can be overcome with some sort of, healing. Now, what does that healing look like, and how different it is? How do they even identify it? Because a lot of us, we have to go through a lot of heartache and a lot of bad experiences and negativity. Could we maybe change that and work on ourselves even before marriage, that we actually can maybe catch it or prevent it beforehand? Is that even a possibility?
Absolutely. So when it comes to your relationships, the first point of view, when people start noticing there's an issue, it's when there's already a pattern forming, okay? There's a negative pattern that's emerging. Now, when that happens, I always say to people, start dissecting that and write down what sort of partner are you attracting? What are their attributes? How are you feeling in that relationship? Are you feeling worthy? Are you feeling, loved and accepted for who you are? Start jotting that down. That provides some information as to what we need to explore when it comes to therapy. Now, I'm going to touch upon the different types of therapies that are available, because a lot of people go through talk therapy and they think, that will help me change. And unfortunately, it's not enough. Talk therapy works with a level of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex at the front of our brain, which just helps us to understand ourselves, understand why we do what we do the way that we do it, but not deeply enough. We don't understand where it comes from. Yeah. The second level of therapy that goes a level deeper is mindset work. So with mindset work, we start to unpick the beliefs that you've got about yourself and the world around you, the global beliefs. Now, unfortunately, the more negative relationship experiences you have as an adult, they're just going to add more layers of negative beliefs, and they're just going to keep stacking up. But even the mindset work's not enough. To deeply heal any patterns, we want to work with our body, which means our brain and our nervous system. Okay, that's the work that I do. I go that deep. And I would say roughly 80% of change comes from your physiology, not your psyche, not your thinking brain. So when we are, so when we are working with the nervous system, your physiology is driving you towards picking that partner. From your nervous system.
Well, Samina, you have raised something so important, and I am going to definitely go deep into it, as deep as you've explained it, but we are coming on to another break. And inshallah, we're going to go much more in depth, because that is such vital information. Take care and see you shortly. Salam.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. We have the lovely Samina Rai with us tonight. Now, we were talking about the therapies and how you help people. But before we go into that, I have got quite a few questions that's come through, and I'm going to take my time to read them. And thank you so much for sending that. Samina, we have our first query from a viewer who is saying, thank you, Salam, Fahima and Samina. Thank you for coming on today, and good mentions about being lonely, being happy, even in a relationship, and still being independent, single, strong, powerful women. For example, I'm a male and I'm talking about a single mother. My question is a little bit unusual for a male viewer. However, what advice do you have for me, who is getting to know a woman who is single, a mum? And what would you say about that, really?
An ended question. I mean, in terms of getting to know somebody, you need to take your time. That's one thing I definitely advise. Take your time to understand somebody, where they're coming from. Because they've already been in a relationship before, try to understand what happened, so that we don't want to repeat a pattern again, a pattern that you end up recreating with that person. This is where conscious relationships come in. If we work on ourselves and understand our triggers, our traumas, and what's made us who we are today, we then become conscious creators of our relationships, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, they do go on to say that women that they're trying to get to know seems to want to have like a casual sexual relationship. I just want to add, this is British Muslim TV. We are representative of our faith, and we actually are promoting halal marriages. And we don't really promote dating in the Western society. When we even mention that terminology, it is not the way you think. We are doing things and talking about things which is permissible in the Islamic faith. And if you want to know more, there is a show where we have a scholar who can give you much more in-depth ideas as to what is allowed and what is not. And even though this is a relationship program, we are going to be in line with our Islamic faith. So I just want to make that very, very clear. We definitely have to do that in the way that we perform here as well, especially on British Muslim TV. We have another question as well, saying, Salam, praying all is well, inshallah. Great discussion tonight on the obstacles of healthy relationships, especially on loneliness versus independence. Now, this is a similar comparison to when after World War I and II, when men were at war and women were hard at work. This is a huge liberation and gave them ultimate independence from just doing housework, chores, and having and raising kids. This is similar in the Asian and Muslim communities of today, of such liberation and independence of both men and women to have such a lifestyle. And hence we assume Islam or marriage, half of faith, will be an obstacle and a deterrent to such liberation and independence and freedom, when in fact, followed correctly, Islam and marriage is the actual independence and freedom and liberation both to men and women that they yearn for. It's actually a very good statement. So thank you so much for whoever's written that in, and also the questions that are sent through. I just want to say again, thank you so much for the interaction. We really do appreciate your questions, and I'm going to try and read some more. If you want to send them through, please do so. The numbers are at the bottom of your screen, and if you want to call in, I'm happy to hear you live here at the studio. Now, when we were talking before the break about the different therapies, I think it's really interesting that you touched upon the fact that we have talking therapy, we've got the mindfulness, and then we have the physiology, which actually works on your subconscious and change the habits and even recreate whatever past experiences you have. Can you explain a little bit more about the work that you do and how it really does make a difference to an individual to change that and actually have a much more healthier relationship?
So when it comes to, for example, relationships and repetitive negative patterns, the compulsion to actually behave in certain ways comes from our nervous system. So when we are meeting somebody, for example, who's new, there's going to be some activation in the system if you're carrying previous unresolved emotional experiences. And this will actually affect the way that you show up, whether you can speak up, whether you are able to set boundaries. So when it comes to therapy, if we don't work with the nervous system and we just start with the talk therapy, what we do is we understand the things that we do, but we don't know how to change them. But when we work with our nervous system, what I'm doing is allowing the body to release any past trauma that's not been completed. I'm going to unpick that a little bit more for you so you understand what I mean, because there's a lot of different definitions of trauma out there. A lot of people understand trauma as an event per se, but it's not. It's actually an unresolved autonomic nervous system response. So let me repeat that. So trauma itself is an unresolved autonomic nervous system response. And I'm going to give you a really simple example so that it makes sense. Imagine if you've got a young child and he or she wants mom's attention. Mom is busy in the kitchen and, cooking. Yeah, I'll be with you in a minute. I'll be with you in a minute. And the child's like a 3-year-old. Mom's not giving them the attention they want. They get upset. They start crying. They're having what we would call some activation in their system, which is like the fight-flight response. Mom will get annoyed. I said I'll be with you in a minute. And the child then takes that personally and feels I am not good enough. And that's what happens. The physiology first happens, and then the meaning is created from that event. Now, typically what happens is that belief then operates in that child's mind, and it continues even into adult life. So when I work with clients and I do some hypnosis, I regress them to the root cause of why they are feeling unworthy in relationships, or why there's a pattern that keeps repeating themselves. And it's usually from birth to 7, there's been an event, and it doesn't have to be a huge abusive event. It can be as small as the example I've given. But for a child, a young child, that's a huge thing. It's a really big deal. Mom didn't give me attention. I'm not lovable, or I'm not good enough for mom, or I'm not worthy. And it sticks, and not just sticks, but also the activation that took place in their system. If mom didn't come and attune to that child and co-regulate their nervous system with that child's nervous system and help calm them down, that child was left with an incomplete response that's now stuck in their body. And this is what typically happens with trauma. We have these layers and layers of unresolved activation in our system that's just waiting to be completed, and it's not been completed. There was no support there. And then in adult life, there's more and more triggers, and people start suffering with their nervous system.
You know, what you've said is so true. However, I'm sure so many people are watching thinking, oh my gosh, did I just, raise, or am I raising children right now? Because at the end of the day, I've just had a go at them. I mean, is it something that is a one-off that doesn't matter, or is it a continuous thing? Because it's so easy for us to just not, for example, give the attention and not think that it's actually going to mean something. So explain to me, is it actually something that has to be repetitive, or is it just enough to do that once to create that meaning that's going to actually stick with that child? Because otherwise all these parents are kind of doomed, really.
Well, I'll be honest, it really depends on the individual child. Sometimes it can be a one-off event that's big enough for the child to carry it, but on the long run, if the child is usually attuned to by their parents, it's not going to do them too much harm. It's when it happens repeatedly. So in cases of childhood trauma and neglect and abuse, it's a repetition that causes the issue. There's a repetition of the child feeling wanting attention or needs something. The parent doesn't attune to them, meet their needs, and then they are stuck with their own emotions, which they have not got the capability of processing. They've not got that maturity. So then they've got this trauma that's stuck. So when we look at an adult who has difficulties in relationships, and we break this down, and they go into their system and start feeling what they're feeling, the old stuff starts to come out, and it has to be felt in order for it to be processed. And then the event that happened maybe 15, 20, 30 years ago gets time stamped into the past, into another part of the brain, which we call the hippocampus. And then it's stored as a past event. But until that's happened, the brain is trying to still complete this whole cycle that's been left incomplete.
Yeah, I guess it really does highlight how important it is to have, the right parenting skill and to really understand your child individually, because also you can bring up children. People say, well, we're bringing up all the same. No, you're not, because you're at a different stage with a different child and their responses are different. Your reactions are different to each child as well. Their demeanor is different. Your whole, way of treating each child will be different, even if they were twins. That's why they both will be brought up differently, even with the same parents and the same environment. So I think what you highlighted is so important. I'm asking these questions because it's so relevant that we understand this, and also to have people like yourself on the show who are extremely valuable. And I'm so excited to know that you are here with us tonight to share this information, so that we can actually know that if there is any sort of help and assistance out there that people are wanting and needing, then hopefully they can come to people like yourself. We do have a few more questions come through, but we are coming on to a break, and I'm going to read them out. Please stay tuned, because I am going to be reading them out, and we are going to be answering them after the break. I just want to recap that what we are actually doing right now is actually talking about your brain and how it affects your physiology. We are talking about your past, your upbringing with your environment and your caregiver, namely the actual parent who is there in front of you, treating you and being with you in a particular way, which actually can trigger negatively or positively, depending on the situation, the scenario, the repetitiveness of it. These are all the things that's been discussed so far. And if I was you, I would take note. And even more so, if you've just joined us, please rewind and take note and make sure that you actually understand this process. Because you know what? We can have such wonderful households, such beautiful relationships, even if you're going into one newly, or even if you are already in one, it can shift to something where you both can be fulfilled if you work on yourself, and especially with professionals like we have tonight on the show. Now, we are going to come back onto another break. Take care and see you shortly.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the final part of Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. It has gone so quick and I'm thoroughly enjoying the conversation, and I hope, inshallah, you're getting that vital, crucial insights as well. We do have some more questions come through, which I'm going to read. But before I do, I want to remind you that some of the topic that we're touching on, some of the issues can be quite triggering. And we do want you to take care of your well-being. So if you want to reach out, we cannot discuss everything on the show. And even though we have professionals on here, we make sure that you actually do seek that extra help outside the episode and, speak to someone professional. And we can also provide with some of that support if you want to contact us on britishmuslim.tv/support. So please do take care, because some of the issues that we raise can actually be quite triggering. And we do have a question for you. Samina, we say, Assalamu alaikum. How do you deal with a husband who is constantly justifies and supports his mother's behavior when she is in the wrong?
That's quite a challenging one, because obviously, first of all, it's a sensitive relationship he has with his mother. The problem there that you've got is you can't change somebody else. You can only change yourself. So I would look at working on how you respond to the husband rather than what the husband's doing. And what's amazing about this inner work that we do is when you change and heal your triggers and your traumas and work on yourself, you change outwardly in such a profound way that people around you start to change too, because the dynamic that you're creating will change. So I would say, look at yourself. What is it that's affecting you in the way that your partner is responding to this? Because we want to get to a point where we're not being triggered, even if the husband is supporting mum.
Yes. I love that question. I just want to say thank you so much for sending that through, because I think it's really powerful. We have this quite often where we do have challenging issues like this, and we don't want to create any more sort of tension. But at the same time, it just goes to show that people always think, well, they're the issue, they're the problem. We need to either separate ourselves from it, or they need to support us, or, things like that, and have the usual kind of blame on the other, when we don't realize how much power we have within. So yeah, definitely take Samina's advice and start looking within and maybe seeking some professional help to talk about this, so that you can get a different insight and hopefully deal with this a lot better. And thank you so much for that question. Actually, I hope that answers it. Another question's come through saying, Assalamu alaikum to Fahima and Samina. As the topic is overcoming barriers for a healthy relationship, some can be trauma, for example, sexual assault. What advice would you two have for male rape victim by a girl before? Should he get therapy? Should he one day tell his future wife about the incident? It's important to move on and self-love, as discussed on the show. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's a very, very deep issue. What's your response to this, Samina?
Yes to both questions. So yes to getting professional help. It's not going to go away on its own. It's something that I do work with quite a lot. Unfortunately, it is something that happens quite a lot. And the thing about rape, there's an element of shame, there's an element of feeling judged, and all of those layers are going to be compounded if they are kept within, because it doesn't go away. Normally in a case of sexual assault, the person's nervous system will have gone into a shutdown, into a freeze response. Somebody will be in a shock and an immobilized state. So we need to softly really unravel that trauma from the nervous system, so the person can heal, complete that cycle of trauma that's stuck in the system, and also move on and make better meanings about it, and not personalize it. It's not about them. And in terms of telling the future partner, yes, but the timing of that is crucial. So not very early on, only with someone you have significant trust built up, you feel that this is somebody I can possibly see my future with. and then bring it up in the right way when it feels right for you. So trust yourself, trust your gut, but it does help to tell a future partner, because more than likely, even when you do some healing with a therapist, trauma heals in relationships. That's the bottom line. So your therapist is your first relationship, a professional relationship to help you heal it. When you cross into a relationship such as marriage, your other attachment stuff will come to the surface too. And there may be an attachment related element to that sexual assault as well, and why it happened in the first place.
Thank you so much, Samina. That was really, really useful. I hope that answers the question. And please do seek professional help. As much as we say it's important to move on and love yourself, but it cannot be done successfully without professional help first. So I do advise you do seek that and do take care. And thank you so much for that question, sending it through and sharing it with us on this platform. Regardless of you being anonymous, honestly, it's so useful to have people like yourselves interact with us and feel safe in order to share your story. Thank you. We have another question for you, Samina. They're coming in faster, quickly as well. How can you help a child at an early age who has gone through neglect by their parents from going on to a bad relationship into the future? So how do you help a child early on so that they don't have a bad relationship later on?
So it's about building up a secure attachment with them, okay? So our attachments start with our caregivers. If a child's gone through a lot of neglect, then they need a lot of support and attunement from a parent who's also regulated in their own emotions. And what I mean by that is, if a parent is anxious, the child is going to be anxious. If a child is around that environment, their nervous system's going to mimic that, because a child cannot self-regulate. How we learn to regulate our emotions comes from our parents. So I'd be very mindful of what kind of way I'm showing up as a parent if I was to support a child who has been through that kind of neglect, because neglect often leads to an avoidant attachment style. So that child is at risk as an adult of being an avoidant, avoiding intimacy, avoiding closeness with not just romantic relationships, but even in workplaces, in the, friendship circles. They'll always be slightly aloof. So to prevent that, they need to build that capacity to trust again, to be feeling comfortable, to be close to a caregiver. And that really takes a lot of time and nurturing and responding to the child, because neglect is the absence of something, the absence of love, the absence of attunement, the absence of, that support that they needed. So we want to give that child the exact opposite. We want to give them the love and the support and the attunement, and that will build that internal resource to love and trust again and connect again. And that will show up as the adult that will then love, learn to trust others again and learn to connect with others.
Samina, you've been so wonderful tonight, and I know we've still got time, but I don't want to wait till the end. I really do want people to know you. And I know you've written a book and you've actually got a lot of work done. So I want to take this time early on before we end to actually learn a little bit about what your book is about and the work that you do, and also to share your information so that people who are watching right now, they can reach you.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I've shared a glimpse into my story because it's my own healing journey that led to my work today. And I've shared part of it in this book called Scene. This is called Scene 2. So this book is about women who have, gone through some difficulties with their mental health, and they've come out the other end, and they are now using it to support others, and they're using it in a really meaningful way. The proceeds for this book go to a charity. It's called Advance Brighter Futures. It's based in North Wales, who do mental wellbeing projects. So it feels wonderful to be part of that project. I was invited to it, and I was delighted to be part of it, because we're giving back as well as sharing our stories so that our stories can help others see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. In terms of working with me, I'm available on Instagram. It's just my full name, Samina Rai. I do a variety of therapies. I offer brain spotting therapy for trauma, trauma release exercises, EMDR flash technique, and hypnotherapy, as well as trauma-informed coaching. So I've got quite a few tools there that I use, mostly body work, some mindset work, and then some conscious work, talk level work as well.
I urge everyone that's watching to go and follow Samina right now on Instagram and also buy her book. I am so intrigued. I loved everything that you've said tonight, and you've only just given us a snippet because I know how deep your work is and how passionate you are as well. And you've done so much work on yourself. So it's not just something that you've just, done a theory with. So tell me a little bit about as well the fact that, how we can actually maybe end up if some last words before we end with regards to healing and some takeaways so that we can actually have you end the show properly, because you've got so much to give. So take it away for the next minute or so.
Okay, so I would say that the dating pool is mainly full of more anxious and avoidant attachment styles, and I really recommend doing some attachment work to really bring that internal security towards yourself. And that comes from you loving yourself and trying to meet the unmet childhood needs that are making you show up the way that you are. So typically an anxiously attached person wants closeness. An avoidantly attached person avoids closeness. So you can see that there's already a mismatch. If you meet somebody who's like that, an anxious and an avoidant, they end up, one's running away and there's that push-pull effect. So I really urge people to really don't wait for more and more of the same pattern to show up. Just reach out and speak to somebody and
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You've been absolutely wonderful. I love having you tonight. And I know you've got so much more information, but we have come to the end of the show. But, please, again, do reach out to Samina. Thank you, Samina, for tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Assalamu alaikum. Take care.